call the special meeting to order, the Marlington Local Board of Education on May 26th, 2020 at 7:01 p.m. If you would all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The reading of the mission statement. In collaboration with staff, community, parents, and students, the Marlington Local School District will develop lifelong learners who understand and apply knowledge and demonstrate excellence in pursuing the highest standards with effective intervention to challenge every student. This meeting is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be considered a public meeting. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Mrs. Gabrick?
Here.
Mr. Hagan?
Here.
Mrs. Humphries?
Here.
Dr. Mason?
Here.
Mrs. Stevens?
Here.
Adoption of the meeting agenda. Are there any additions or corrections? Hearing none, is there a motion that the Marlington Local Board of Education adopt the following agenda for the May 26, 2020 special meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? If I could just ask one thing during this portion, if to cut down on any feedback and to help everyone hear a little bit better, if you could keep your mics muted when you're not speaking, I think that would help the meeting flow a little better. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Mrs. Gabrick?
Yes.
Mr. Hagan?
Yes.
Mrs. Humphries?
Yes.
Dr. Mason?
Yes.
Mrs. Stevens?
Yes.
Motion approved 5-0.
Old business, the 5-year forecast. Is there a motion to approve the 5-year forecast as presented and marked Exhibit 00?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Do we want to start with Mrs. Bruger? If you could give us a brief overview and let us know if we're at the same point that we left the last meeting, or maybe go over a few more documents that you've added. And I do appreciate the extra things you placed in Dropbox for our help.
Sure. Yeah, I'm just doing my best to try and help you guys along. If you have any questions, I've added some different documents that Mrs. Gabrick has asked for. And I just have a few things to say as far as there's still many items that are unknown that will be changing for next year, that the governor, from the governor's cuts to district staffing. Additionally, we don't know what the effects of the pandemic will have on our revenue or expenditures, long term or even in the short term. Everything within this forecast is going to change even more so than in a year, even more so than in a year when nothing out of the ordinary is occurring. The best thing to do, in my opinion, is to either approve the forecast as presented or vote no and discuss how the board would like to amend it. And we can have discussion, and I'll help you guys as best I can with, whatever you guys want to come up with. In November, we will have a completely different set of data to work with as more information comes available. So that's just kind of some thoughts that I had.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other discussion?
From my perspective, I think due to all the confusion and different calculations that were made with this forecast that aren't similar to the previous forecasts, I would recommend a motion to go back off of the previous November 2019 forecast and just simplify this whole situation by taking the original numbers from the 2019 forecast and then adding in, what's changed since then, such as the 10% possible cuts in state funding, and also the additional operating costs for Marlboro Elementary, the actual operating costs that we know we're going to incur. And I think that would simplify everything, and it still would be a conservative approach.
So you'd be recommending that we stick with the purchase service line that was projected in the November forecast?
Yeah, pretty much everything except for the 10% state funding cut. So that way we're prepared if that were to occur, which hopefully it won't, as well as the additional operating costs, similar to what you had in your revised forecast back in March.
Okay. There's one document I'd like to share with you, if that's okay. Is the board okay with that? Yes?
Go ahead.
Okay. It's something I had placed in Dropbox. Let me share my screen just to kind of give you an idea. Here. Okay. This, can you see? It's a white screen with some numbers and a yellow, white and yellow. Are you seeing all that?
Is that
Okay.
the one that added the Dropbox at 5:41 today? The forecast actual over years purchase service?
Yes, yes. It was just another idea I had to help convey some things to you guys.
Okay.
So this was another thought I had. I'm just constantly thinking of things and trying to think of ways I can convey what's going on to you guys. And so this first set of data here is the 2017 forecast. And this is what was projected in that forecast, the 3.8, 3.8, 3.9. Those were the projected in that forecast. The actuals, that this line here is what actually happened. Okay.
How do you have actually happened in 2020 and 2021 already?
Well, because you have, if you look in the forecast, if you look at the current, like the 2019 forecast, you'll see the actual data of what actually happened in 2017 and 2018 and 2019. This is what actually transpired. Okay.
But you have a number on what actually transpired on the lines for 2020 and 2021 as well.
For 2020 and 2020. Right. I put a divider line here because these are projections, but I was just putting this in here so you could kind of see my data.
So it's a projection versus a projection, not a projection versus the
Yeah, that's why I put a dividing line here to kind of. And 2020, we're so close to the end. These are pretty healthy projections.
Okay.
And, we're probably going to land pretty close to here.
Are actual as of now, or is that projected to be the actual amount?
For 2020?
Yes.
This is a projection. I mean, it's not an actual as of now, but it's pretty safe to say we're gonna land here because this is what. I mean,
we're only a month away.
Right. Yes. So
it's pretty clear.
Right, unless something strange happens, which with everything that's going on, it's possible.
No, I only asked on the 2020 just to know if that was the actual for the 2020 or if that's.
Yeah, that's understandable. I mean, I guess I could have drawn the line here. It's just since we're pretty darn close, I drew it here. But anyway, so projected numbers, and then actuals, and then for the 2018 I'm sorry, let me back up. And then you see the deviations of, and you can see in the 2017 forecast, they took a flatter approach to the projections. And that's not actually what happened. And there were pretty strong deviations. And so I'm only showing this to you because I want you to understand where I'm coming from with my projections. That's why I'm a little apprehensive about flatlining. That's why I'm showing this to you, because I'm trying to follow what I'm seeing. And this is my methodology, and I'm trying to convey this to you so you understand where I'm coming from. And then again, in the 2018 forecast, you see what was projected, and then what actually happened, and then the deviations. And they're pretty strong deviations. And again, like I said, 2020 is still a projection, but we're probably going to land pretty close there unless we have something weird happen with the COVID-19 stuff or whatever. And then the 2019 forecast, once again, still there's a pretty strong deviation in the 2020.
Now,
So
what were part of the deviation for 2020? Would that be extra hires through the SC? Did they play into that?
are you talking about right here?
For the 2020 number, for current actual, or the actual one for 2020, is part of that actual number due to, you know, additional hires through ESC, or what happened where we were so far different than the original projections for this year?
Where it was projected 3.9 versus the 4.4.
Yeah.
I mean, I could tell you that I know the 180,000 of it is because of I had 180 a funding change with 6B special ed funding.
Okay.
So I know that to be true, but aside from that, you know, it's another treasurer's forecast, so it's kind of hard for me to speak to that. But I do know 180,000 of it is because of a funding change.
I
Yeah.
think we're actually looking at the actual cost. Would the additional buses would be in there perhaps, and the technology purchases, is that all in there?
No, purchase services are not busing. That's more of a capital outlay line item. Capital outlay line item. Sorry. And then, sorry, what was the other item?
Is that where you put it?
Capital outlay, yes. Okay.
Okay.
So I guess give the detail that you put in capital outlay versus the improvements.
Sorry.
Could you give us what the capital outlay versus what ended up in purchase services as improvements that are in purchase services?
Well, purchase services are just that. They're services to the district. So nothing of nothing material, physical would go into purchase services. They're
So there's
completely
no repairs in there? No
well.
repairs?
A repair would be a service. They're repairing something, so
And
that's different.
so how much of
Yes, it
repairs
depends.
are there?
Well, it would depend on the nature of the repair. I mean, if you're repairing like a faucet or something small, but if you're building, if you're contributing to, it just depends on the item. But generally, the items that are in capital outlay are like technology purchases and things like that right now. I mean, we don't have anything. We don't have a whole lot going on in capital outlay, really.
Okay, this document showing us, just to be clear, this is the purchase services line itself, correct?
Yeah,
That's
this
what
is
document is.
strictly purchase services, right?
Right, okay.
So besides the labor from ESC, we would have professional services in there. We have utilities, is that correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Repair labor only for repairs? Is that what you're saying? No materials?
No, it would be materials as well. Anything that is that's like a smaller scale repair, I guess, is the best way to. You know, you have a plumber come in here and fix something small scale. That would fall under that 423 object code, which falls into that.
And a smaller repair would be under what threshold would you define that as?
I don't have a threshold for that. It's just more or less like a capital asset is like typically like $5,000 and above. So it just depends on what goes into capital outlay based on what it is by definition, and by you have to kind of look at a few different things.
If you can help us look at those few different things, I think that would maybe help it be clear. I mean, you only have for 20, you have 482,000 in capital outlay. So, I mean,
So are we done looking at purchase services then? Because we're kind of all over the board right now.
well, I think you're saying they're in between those two categories. Is that correct?
No, when I was
There's
talking,
some major repairs in the capital outlay, and then some in purchase services. Is that what you're saying?
no, district repairs, there are smaller district repairs and purchase services. And then you might have, speaking on like larger scale items, that you might have some items in capital outlay. Like I'm trying to think what you might have, like something.
Like roofing projects, that kind of a thing.
Yeah, just like larger scale things that add value to the district.
The window, the HVAC window project at the high school, those types of projects.
Right, or a boiler or something like that. Like
Boiler, good example.
yes, those things that end up as yes, correct.
Yeah.
Well, the 482, I don't think that's going to cover the air conditioning at the high school cost, plus the buses we just bought, plus the technology upgrade and iPads we just bought. It just doesn't seem like that 482,000 in capital outlay wouldn't be enough. So it's perhaps of that, some of that maybe under the purchase services category.
No, that's incorrect. That's not at all.
Well, then help us with the 482. What's that covering then? If you can bring that up and tell us what the large ticket items are in that, that'd be helpful.
So I'm not even sure what
It's your forecast for fiscal year 2020.
do you want me to
Capital outlay was
okay,
0.05.
we're done looking at purchase services then. I can remove this screen.
Well, maybe not, but we may come back.
Okay, I'll just take it down so I can, because we're kind of jumping around here. So I'm trying to stay focused so we're not all over the place. Okay, so now we want to talk about capital outlay, correct?
What you put in there, right?
Okay, so capital outlay. Hold on. Now, capital outlay is specific to the purchases that we're making in the specific years. So we're talking
Yeah,
about.
I'm talking. Yeah, 2020. If you could just do 2020, that would be fine.
So we're talking about the wireless purchase. We have the bus purchases in there. We have some reduction with the CARES money worked in there, which is split between years. There's the technology purchase at $347,000. Let's see what else there is. And there are also some items in there that were previously in there related to technology as well that I brought in from the previous treasurer's information, such as payments on technology that we're moving forward to.
How much was that, did you say?
I don't have that specific information handy right this moment, but it was it was just brought forward so that money would be available to make the payments.
And
And
the
it-
high school HVAC.
I don't think it was spelled out in the previous treasurer's assumptions either. So it was just, anyway, what was that?
And the high school HVAC, that would have been in capital outlay as well, or where's that classified to?
So where are you seeing high school HVAC?
The air conditioning. I'm not seeing it. I'm asking you where it is.
Oh, I believe that was taken care of through 003 PI. Are you talking about the high school? Yeah, that was purchased through 003. Right, Joe?
The air conditioning and the window project is what she's referring to.
Yeah, that all kind of predates me. So
So that was paid with permanent improvement, and so that would have been less than the 500,000 that's in there, I guess.
that, well,
I
no,
thought the project was more than that.
that's a completely different fund. That's not even out of the
Well, I
general.
understand that, but if it's 500,000, I thought the project was exceeded that.
What are you talking about? The 500,000? I'm not sure where you're
The
coming up
PI
with.
fund, the
Correct.
permanent improvement fund, don't we get 500,000 in that? Revenue?
Each year it brings in a little over 500,000, I think, is Mrs. Gabrick's point.
Oh, yeah, I think that's.
Is it like 533? Don't quote me on that, Katie. I'm sure you're going to find it, but I think it's somewhere close to that number, maybe.
I'll have to double check that, but that's probably close to accurate.
So I guess the question is, that was sufficient to pay for all of the high school air and windows then, the 500,000, which I thought that project cost more than that.
Like I said, that project, that all predates me, but I can look into that for you and get you the answers. This is all outside of the 5-year forecast and general revenue fund and all the, I mean, these are all questions that are not related to what we're discussing tonight. So I'm having a hard time answering.
Well, the question is whether it was in fact 100% paid for with permanent improvements, or whether we had to use some of the general fund monies to pay for that.
Oh, no,
I think that's
I haven't paid for any of the air conditioning stuff to my knowledge. I haven't written any checks out of the general fund for that. So no.
What
So-
about the previous treasurer? Because that would have taken place, the air conditioning would have taken place in the fall.
As far as I have seen, no. But like I said, that all predates me. So
Katie, looking back on the purchase services, you based your projection based on what we actually spent over the past several years. Is that correct? Your projections were based on looking at the numbers we spent rather than putting $3.85 million in across the line as a projection.
correct.
And that's how you came up with the numbers you're using.
Yes, I'm looking at historical projections and forecasting that forward, and also taking into consideration whether that's logical or makes sense based on our situation.
Okay.
Does anyone have any further questions on the purchase services before we move on with some other questions?
Yeah, I guess my only question is, why wasn't it with these deviations in prior forecasts and the future forecasts, even after they had a negative against what they projected, the actual more, if you look at, can you put that back up there, Katie, so what I'm saying actually makes sense to people,
Sure. Let me grab it here.
the actual versus over the years?
Oh, hang on a minute, I lost it. Here it is.
All right, so basically what I'm looking at from this, oh, you don't have it up yet.
Almost there. Sorry.
Not yet. Yeah.
I think I X'd out of it, so I had to go back and find it. All right, can you see it?
Yep, we got you now. You're good.
Okay.
Okay. So, you know, what I'm seeing here, if you look at the first top, part of the graph here, 2017 forecast, if you look at under 2018, which was projected then, they had 3,858,000 projected, and the actual was 4 million. So they had a negative 229 projected, correct? Or no, the difference between the projected and actual. But then they went from that in the next year's forecast, and not only did they do what you're doing, which is to take previous year's forecasts and bring that number up, they actually reduced the number for the following year's projections. So that's what I don't understand, is how they can project smaller numbers after having come in over what their previous projection was, and then they continue to lower their projections. And I guess what I'm saying is, if before they were lowering the projections after overspending, that's, going with what we have now. And I wouldn't say it's flatlining, because it fluctuates based off that November forecast, and it is more than these lines, the previous projections, by $300,000-$400,000 more that we're projecting than in 2018 and 2019. So we are assuming an increase, but what I find odd is now we're making projections that are far higher than actual spending, when before, when they'd see their actual spending was over, they would reduce the future projections. So I think it would be logical that if we are at this point continuing with the current projections versus lowering them as they did in the past, we're at least taking a more conservative approach than they were then, versus raising that number significantly and putting us into fiscal caution. And besides the fact, I'm sure there's other line items besides purchase services where numbers are projected higher and they come in lower, and this kind of balances out somewhat. Either if it didn't, we'd have had issues, quite a few issues with this balancing out in the past.
Well, I'm just projecting what I'm seeing. And so if you see the actuals at 3.6, 4, 4.3, 4.4, 4.6, this actually, well, we won't go as 4.6, far as 4.6, because that's a projection. But this trend actually took place. It actually happened. And so as a treasurer, you're kind of tasked to look at what actually took place and go off of the trend and show your board what's happening so that they can be cognizant of that and make decisions based on that. That's kind of what I'm tasked with. And so if I were to do something like, change a number based on what I, think we should do, I'm stepping out of my lane.
Yeah.
I think we should reduce purchase services. Well, that's not really in my lane. Does that make sense?
Yes,
And so my duty is to inform you.
absolutely.
And so that's kind of where I'm at with all of this.
Okay.
But to Josh's point, I think if we look at this, I mean, these are projections. And obviously, the further out you get with your projections, the more difficult it is to project both revenue and expenses. And we do adjust each year
Twice a year.
as we move into the forecast when we get closer to it. In 2017, if you look where we are, I mean, based on the chart you have, we were only 193,000 different, and we were actually under what was projected. In the 2018, if you look on line 2 where it says 2018 forecast, the closest projection we had would have been for that year was at the 41,000, and our actual is 4,087, and we were 12,000 under that projection. And the only year we went over was the 19 when we got closer to that year, and we were off by the 63,000. So for us to be projecting $4 million over where you expect us to be in the next 4 years might not be reasonable, because it looks like, based on the numbers you have on this chart, we actually weren't that far off.
Well, yeah, as it gets closer, you're going to make adjustments based on what you have going on. You're going to see the trend and you're going to make changes. And that's what forecasting is all about, to show you, hey, this is what's happening. We need to make some changes. That's what like I said, that's what my job is, to show you. And then we change and we make things, we change the trend, we make adjustments. And so, yeah, what you're saying, that's true. What I've projected based on the decisions that you make, will likely not come to fruition because of the decisions that you make. So, there's a lot of truth to what you're saying there, because of it's just, like I said, like I keep saying, it's just my duty to perform, or to inform you on what I'm seeing. And so I'm just trying to fulfill my obligation to you guys.
Well, I think what might also be overinflating the number is the wellness fund, because I mean, we have created more jobs because of the extra money coming in. I know that we took some of our positions and moved them over to that category. So I think that may be why we did see a decrease in perhaps one of those years where you said that you didn't understand why we would have had a decrease.
Well, the other concern of mine is, in a webinar I was in with the state funding and everything that's going on, there was a little bit of a speak to the wellness funds that they're not untouchable. So, and nothing has been set in stone yet, but it is, I mean, it's a possibility that we may not get as much wellness funds as was originally mentioned. So,
Or they might go away, Katie. I mean, when Aaron Roush said that for the first time, that's the first time publicly I've ever heard anybody talk about those wellness funds. I mean, the governor came out and said this is kind of his baby. That was the first time that we in the room kind of took a big gasp of air, because it kind of sounds like now that might be on the radar.
yeah, everybody's kind of just
sad to hear.
Right, but for us to keep projecting the worst possible scenario when we don't know what that is, it's making the forecast kind of upside down.
Honestly, it's not the worst possible scenario. You could have a mass exodus of open enrollment out. You could have a increase in special education costs that is far more than you've had. I mean, there are a lot of anomalies that could happen that.
Like there's always something worse that can happen no matter what.
Exactly. So to say it's a worst case, I'm projecting worst case scenario, honestly, it's following what has been trending. And so I'm just, like I said, I'm just trying to convey that to you, that what has been trending is what I'm pushing out. And as we change the trends, we can change the line, but and it's up to you. It's your forecast. But I'm just trying to convey to you that this is what I'm seeing. And,
Well, actually, I mean, it's the treasurer's forecast that you present to the board, and I mean, you're in there day to day, and we're asking you to give us a realistic forecast, I guess, is what I would be looking for, is something that's realistic. I would believe that
Given the
the
situation, it's
treasurer
kind
and the superintendent wouldn't want us to, would be making recommendations as to what to do when you're seeing a $4 million increase in purchase service. Are you going to ask us the board to continue with that kind of spending when you're
This
projecting lower income?
forecast is as realistic as possible based on past trends. And my recommendations to you would be to look at spending and make changes based on past trends and see how we can change. And take into consideration the fact the current situations with the pandemic and everything that is going on. There are a lot of districts that are in this situation right now because
Yeah.
of everything that's going on.
Well, I would just like to say that, if we amended the forecast to reflect the 2019 numbers, like I suggested before, adding in the 10% possible state funding cuts and the additional operating costs of opening Marlboro, we will be making those same decisions either way, especially due to the fact that the 10% state funding cuts, we're going to have to prepare for that either way, whether we go with that forecast or, my suggestion.
I think what's very clear is that this has a lot of moving parts. And as Katie said, she's doing her job. So for you to say, well, let's just do this, that's my suggestion. That can be your suggestion. And if the three of you vote for that, that's how it will be. But she's clearly stated her position and all the research and why she does what she does, because she's the professional. So it seems to me that that's the smart thing to do, was listen to the professional. If someone hires a professional to do a job, you listen to their recommendation rather than say, well, yeah, that's good and all, but I don't think that's really realistic, when it's their job to come up with this. That seems kind of out there to me.
Karen, did you not vote on the professional report back in November?
I did, but this is not this is going to happen like this, a forecast, so that you are pre-warned to take action. This is not hard to understand. It's not, this is exactly what's going to happen. This is not what she has said. And no one understands a forecast to be that. It is, this is what I know. And with all these variables coming in, this is what could happen. And we need to be cautious. That's not difficult to understand.
No, I agree with that 100%.
Great. So then why don't we do that? Make some moves. I mean, I know how we could save $2 million right now. Don't reopen Marlboro. Don't put $1.4 million into the, and not have Attorney Markling working at $285 an hour, doing things like setting the agenda. I mean, it's easy. We have things we control. Why don't we take control of the things we can? And then the other things, we just are going to have to see how they pan out. But this is not rocket science, really.
Okay.
But with all due respect, Karen, you just said about listening to the professional. Attorney Markling is a professional too, and we seem not to agree on that as well. But it just seems that, like Josh had said, the 2019 forecast did have more answers. This one seems, honestly, to not have as many certain answers. So I would also recommend going with the 2019 forecast.
That's because it's a projection from what hasn't happened. 2019 was what happened in that circumstance. So you guys can dance all around this and do what you want, because you will, but the truth is clearly seen. This is clearly seen. So just do what you will, but it's obvious. It's obvious what's happening here. You came in with a conclusion, you're trying to line up the facts to support that conclusion. And rather than look at the facts and arrive at a conclusion. So go ahead, you'll proceed as you want, but it's easy to see what's going on here.
I think anybody can draw conclusions as well from, if they take the time and look at the 2019 forecast and they compare it themselves with this one. I think a lot of people are going to be left with a lot more questions than the board has had. we have $8.3 million discrepancy on fund balance, or what is it? Yeah, the fund balance on line 12.010. And that's hard to understand when we look at the previous forecast. And the only thing that has changed since then is the reopening of Marlboro Elementary and COVID-19 and the state funding, possible cut in state funding. That's not guaranteed. And that's why I'm recommending using those same numbers from the previous forecast, adding in the 10% cut to our state funding for the possibility that that could occur, and also the additional operating costs. Those are the two big things that have changed since that forecast. So I don't think that it's absurd that that's what we decide to do our forecast off of. And I think, putting in there the 10% for the possible cuts is, extremely conservative. We don't know if that's going to come to conclusion because, the state's talking about making cuts next year, but at the same time, when they're recommending schools taking all these extra precautions that could cost the schools money, how are they going to tell them to put 10 kids on a bus instead of 60 and cut this money at the same time? It's not doable. And the state's going to have to consider all of that and all the other, recommendations for social distancing and sanitization. It's kind of hard. They're going to be hard pressed to tell schools that they're going to make 10% in cuts and tell them that they have to make the environment safe for the kids. It's just not doable for most schools. So I say we prepare for the 10% cuts. I don't think it's going to be that much just because of what I said, but we'll see. But like I said, I think that that's being, more than cautious going that route. And I appreciate all of Katie's input and her projections. And I definitely think we should consider all that stuff and work towards making changes as well. We can do both. We can do the forecast with the 2019 with the additional 10% cuts and the additional cost of reopening Marlboro. And we can also take her advice on, restructuring and, doing what we need to do to, make cuts where we have to try to align our revenue with our expenses.
Joe, or Katie, I just sent you an email with a document in it, and I was wondering if you would be able to share that. It just has a little bit of a timeline on the past couple forecasts that might, having a visual might be helpful. I just sent it through to your email on a timeline for the past five-year forecast back to May 2019.
You want us to project it, you're saying, right now?
Would you be able to share that?
Katie, can you
Yes.
do that? You're up and running? Okay.
Yeah, let me see.
Okay. And Josh, I just want to say one thing about some of your comments. What we are hearing is the governor's making it very clear that instead of using the state's rainy day fund, districts need to start using theirs. They have calculated how many millions of dollars fiscally conservative districts like ours have in the rears. And what we are hearing is now's a good time for school districts to use some of those savings moving forward. Right or wrong, that's what we are hearing. So this is something else for us to be thinking about.
So I just wanted just an overview of this. If we go back to the May 2019 forecast, Ryan Jones prepared that, and we showed at the end of the five-year forecast, it was a $1 million deficit overall. In November 2019, it showed $2 million deficit, and that was prepared by Tammy Hurst, who works at the ESC, and Leslie Pierce, I believe, joined in on that forecast. Then in March, Katie prepared a preliminary five-year forecast, and that showed a $4 million deficit. And now in May 2020, it's an $11 million deficit. So we have seen nearly a $9 million loss in the past 6 months. And that just seems, it seems unrealistic that it is that significantly different in light of the two major changes, as Josh pointed out, were Marlboro and the 10% cut that you have presented for next year's budget. So it just seems like it's just we've been a very conservative district. We've had conservative spending. We've met many of our forecasts, as you've seen. We adjust them as we go. We make the decisions and cut spending where necessary, don't overspend on projects, and keep it in line. So I think it's, I just wanted to try to kind of give an overview of that. And just, I mean, really in 6 months' time, nearly 9 million is lost in the forecast. So I know you said that with the high turnover of treasurers, you had to go back and make several corrections. So to me, that means if you've got one, I'm assuming about a $1 million cut in the revenue, and I'm not sure what you booked for Marlboro. I don't know whether it was like 1.5 million. You know, it's leaving $6 million of prior period adjustments, basically, that you're showing in this forecast.
Well, there's over a $1 million cut just in government COVID-19. It's well over a $1 million cut. It's between you've got $400,000 for 2020, and then almost $1 million for 2021, and then also you've got reduction or potential reductions in tax collections. You have, I mean, there's a lot of things you have to think about with that.
But the $400 cut was offset by the CARES stimulus money, correct?
Yeah,
Pretty close.
we reduced expenditures related to, so yeah, you could say that. But
So can you put that note into the forecast to keep our numbers in perspective, that we lost the 400, but we got back nearly 400 in the federal CARES funding that you used to reduce expenses? I mean, I
Yeah.
think that's important to
that's
say.
already in my assumptions.
Yeah, that's in 3.050, actually, the CARES funding.
When you went over the enrollment figures, I was trying to follow your historic projections based on the chart you had prepared. And when I compared the numbers in your charts, they were significantly less than what our actual enrollment was for that year. And I'm trying to determine where our students went based on your projections to try to come up with enrollment going forward, and what we actually presented to the state as our true and accurate ADM.
Are you talking about ADM as far as what prior forecasts had on them?
Talking about your chart that you prepared and gave to us to figure out what you were going to report for enrollment going forward and what was actually presented to the state that we got paid for.
Okay, well, the enrollment on my assumptions comes directly from the SFPR reports that we are funded for. It is an intensive formula to come up with those numbers, but that is directly where it is coming from.
So why would that not match our forecast?
It matches the SFPR report and it matches my forecast.
Are you including open enrolled in your numbers?
I'm including, yeah, it would be all enrollment. So yes.
So for example, on your chart that you prepared that as part of the 5-year forecast packet that you gave us for 2017, for example, you had 2,344, or that was the actual 2,344 is what we presented in May at the end of that year to the state. So that should have been accurate. But in your chart that you pulled out from the other source, you're saying it only showed 2,255.
Wait, what chart are you talking about?
You know that 25-page report you gave us for the 5-year forecast, that chart that you were using to determine enrollment going forward. So that was like page 8 of your report when you were calculating our future enrollment. those numbers seemed significantly lower than what our true and actual numbers were. So I'm trying to figure out why we have a discrepancy there.
So are the numbers that we are funded for based off of the SFPR report that you can get from the Ohio Department of Education. So what are the numbers that you are looking at that you're comparing that to?
But look at the November 19 forecast.
That's not my forecast. So I don't
Well, it
know.
doesn't matter whose
So
it
I
is.
don't-
It belongs to the district. So I'm hoping you're part of our district here.
Well,
Um,
what I can tell you is there are lots of different ways to look at enrollment. There's butts and seats, there's head count, there's funded FTE. And so that's why I'm saying that's not my forecast and I can't speak for it because I don't know what version of enrollment they're using. I'm using funded FTE because from the SFPR report because that is what makes sense to me because that is what we are funded by. I can't speak for other people's forecasts. I'm sorry. I wish I could. I'm trying.
Well, when we have that much of a variance, I mean, I would hope that, I mean, one of these treasurers is sitting in your office. I would have hoped you might have been able to reach out to her because she would have prepared 3 of our last, or probably 6 of our last forecasts, and perhaps helped with the November one. So
The
I
November
think with that large of a variance, that would have been a curious question to have asked.
The November forecast was Tammy Hurst's forecast, and she was responsible for it.
And Leslie didn't do any work on it whatsoever.
All I can tell you is the November forecast belonged to Tammy Hurst, and she is responsible for it. That's all I know.
Well, even, I mean, regardless, if we're off 80 or 90 students or whatever, it's off each year. I mean, that seems like a significant amount to try to figure out why our prior forecast used a different way to count students than you are.
Well, I can also
And
tell
that
you.
would definitely impact our revenue. But
Well,
the other thing I'm trying to figure out, Katie, is as I'm looking at this, our decrease each year is less and less as our student enrollment levels out and our kindergartners have increased slightly. So the decrease has become less. So to calculate 60 less per class seems, for every single year, just seems too high of a decrease. I mean, if I compare the actual that I'm seeing from 19 to 20 based on the forecast, we only decreased 29 based on that figure.
Well, what I can tell you that I'm looking at is looking at our bud work report, which is a summary of purchase service expenditures for the last, since fiscal year 16. We have had a decrease in an increase in open enrollment out. 16 to 17, 44,000 decrease. 17 to 18, $22,000 increase. 18 to 19, $43,000 increase in expenditures. 18 to 19, $41,000 increase in expenditures. So that to me shows that we have more kids leaving every year.
Well, our previous treasurers and our current superintendent has told us that our open enrolled in exceeded and has exceeded our open enrolled out numbers for many years. So if that changed, you're saying that changed this year?
Well, I'm sure that as long as it exceeds your open enroll in, then you're winning the game, and that is a good thing.
So are we or aren't we? I guess is the question based on your explanation.
I'm almost certain you are. I don't have the data sitting in front of me.
We're winning the game as far as we have more people coming to Marlington than leaving. But I think Katie's point is that gap is narrowing, I think is what she is saying. But at the end of the day, we do have more coming, but for whatever reason, I think Katie's point is that open enrollment out number is sneaking up on the number of open enrollment coming in. Is that a fair statement, Katie, based on your numbers, correct?
Well, I've been looking because of the purchase service piece. I've been looking at the outs. I just happen to have that data on me.
Right. Right.
So that's really where I was going with it. And
Right.
because the outs do kind of back up the whole declining enrollment thing, that's kind of where that's why I was talking about that.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, if you have anything to add on that, that's great.
Katie, could you further clarify? I had asked you a question at the last meeting that in the past and up to this year, we've always been a district on the guarantee for the transitional aid guarantee. Did you calculate from this point forward that we are on the guarantee or that we're off?
The funding formula is frozen right now. So right now it doesn't matter. We're not on the guarantee. It's frozen formula. But if that were in effect, we would be on the guarantee. But the funding
So
formula.
the question is, how is that in the forecast? Do you have us on the guarantee or off the guarantee?
It doesn't matter right now. The funding formula is frozen. So it's not really a thing right now.
I guess I don't understand your answer. It's not a thing, so you took us off the guarantee.
I
So
don't
you're
take
not
or
showing
put
what made it.
on the guarantee. The funding formula is frozen right now. So our funding remains constant. We're not funded in that manner right now. It's in NA, not applicable right now.
So did you make it NA for all future years for 2020 through 2024?
It's flatlined right now. And that's the same as the November 2019 forecast. Because we don't know. We don't know how the funding formula is going to change or evolve. It's frozen.
I also think it's important to mention again that I think that it's my opinion and the board's opinion that repairing our schools is a fiscally responsible option. All three elementaries can be repaired for under $6 million, as opposed to had we moved forward with the consolidated elementary with the local share plus interest that would have reached close to 30 million if you include the interest in the payments we would have had to make. And our budget would be, our 5-year forecast would be in much worse shape with those kind of figures and trying to figure out how that would be funded. So I believe that the repairs that have been discussed at various board meetings are very fiscally responsible, and taking care of our buildings is the responsible thing to do. Katie, do you have any information on the House bill that was proposed to extend the deadline for the 5-year forecast by another 30 days?
No, I did not.
Do you have any, you don't have any word whether that has passed or not?
No. As far as I know, the forecast is due by the end of May.
Can we do a revised forecast if we want to? If we vote on a forecast tonight, we can always revise that, correct? Or do we have to wait 6 months?
I can do a forecast anytime. There's not.
So we can revise it, you know, if they move that deadline up, we could revise the forecast and resubmit it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I can do a forecast anytime there's a significant change, or just like with everything that's going on, with the funding, with the COVID-19 situations. There's no law that says you can only submit a forecast twice a year at these dates. No, I can update it whenever I deem necessary, or you can.
Okay. Well, I mean, we can sit here and, you know, try to pick this apart for hours and hours and hours. I think, it's going to make more sense to a lot of people if we just amend the forecast as I suggested prior, and, just revise it as time goes on, revisit it and see what it looks like, make any necessary adjustments.
So based on your recommendation, for clarification purposes, so that I have it, I fully understand it, the only piece that we're actually revising, it would, in my forecast, would be the purchase service line, correct? Because otherwise would get very confusing the way that,
How so?
just with all the moving parts, I think it would just be difficult to follow. I mean, is the purchase service line the only piece that we're changing here?
No,
Or are
my
there other pieces?
suggestion was to base our current forecasts to reflect the forecast in the November 19 forecasted numbers in every line except for the, obviously the adjustment for Nexus, but also the 10% cut in state funding and the additional operating cost of Marlboro Elementary. And correct me if I'm wrong, Carolyn asked what the actual numbers were for that this year in the last meeting. Did you say it was between 250 and 300,000? The actual savings that we incurred?
Say that again. You were cutting.
The closure of Marlboro this year, the savings that we actually have from the closure of Marlboro, was that between 250 and 300,000?
No, that was more along the lines of 360,000, according to the report that was around when I first got here.
Okay, I must be confusing that with something else because from the
Yeah,
last.
that was staffing, and then I think there was like electric and those garbage and those kinds of things on there too. They got it up to like 380, I think, Katie.
Yeah.
But wasn't our projected savings that we looked at earlier when we were voting to reopen Marlboro 300 and what was it, 385, and that was just staffing?
I'll have to go back and look. I thought maybe it was 385 all in. I thought maybe it was,
385 should have been everything.
yeah, I think 385 was all in.
Okay,
I could be off a little bit though, to be honest with you.
between 250 and 300,000. Okay. All right.
Just the way that you're doing this here, and with the deadline being what it is, you're basically asking me to redo an entire forecast and rewrite a whole set of new assumptions. And so that's why I was asking about that rather than just inserting one line. But if that's what you're doing, that's what you're doing. So that's why I was asking.
So we're asking
that's-
you to take another treasurer's forecast and extend it by 1 year.
No, 6 months ago, Scott.
It's another treasurer. Okay, extend it by 6 months.
Yes.
6 months. There's a lot that's happened in that 6 months.
And add the major things that happened in those 6 months. Absolutely. That makes sense to me. The forecast that you approved 6 months ago, add to that what additional items that have changed since then. That makes
And it's not her forecast then. Is that
sense. Scott, she said that in the last meeting and this meeting.
I'm asking a question, Josh, and I'm not even asking it to you. I'm asking it to Katie to
Right.
clarify if she's putting in, she's being asked to take someone else's forecast and adjust it. So
Yes.
my feeling is then her name doesn't go on it.
Well, this is the board's forecast, and I've presented my recommendation for the board's forecast. And so now the board is choosing to amend it to go, well, what sounds like to basically go back to the November one from what I'm gathering, with some changes, is what I'm hearing. For clarification.
And
Red
actually,
flag.
if we just went back to Katie's forecast for March, she had the revised forecast in March, and that had the Marlboro figures in it. And although I think it was high on the cost for Marlboro, to that, all we would need to be would be add the 10% projected cut in the state foundation funds.
Well, the March forecast was the November forecast. It was just an update because the March wasn't a forecast. It was a November forecast with an update on Marlboro.
Right.
So it's the
Right,
same.
but you had gone through that and done a significant amount of work on that to get the additional cost to that, and that did take it then to the, instead of the -2 million, it took it to the -4 million at the end of your forecast. So the additional cuts then you're projecting for the state then would increase that. So it still would end in a significant deficit, just not at the $11 million mark.
I think this amount of changes, I'm a little apprehensive because there's so many changes here. I'm not even sure that I can do this on my own and then submit it like without board approval of the final document, because you're asking me to change Tammy's forecast and then I mean, I don't even have the document to give you because there's so many changes to add, like, and a whole new set of assumptions. Like, I'm not even sure I can do that.
We
That's-
couldn't continue with the previous assumptions and just make the 2 changes. I mean, it's just 2 changes to that forecast that was in my recommendation.
It's gonna change every line item, and
Katie's point is she doesn't have those numbers already in her template, basically, is what she's saying. It's redoing a whole 5-year forecast. That's your point at this stage, right, Katie?
correct. I mean, we've got like the Nexus. There's just a lot of things that are gonna.
I mean, the nexus, of course, would have to be changed, but that's in and out, so that doesn't affect the bottom line. So the nexus, of course, would have to be changed.
I'm just a little uncomfortable with saying, Katie, make all these changes, and then I have to write up assumptions that go along with this that aren't really my assumptions. They're the previous treasurer's assumptions, and then
You
But-
shouldn't have to. You shouldn't have to do that.
my level of comfort is with all this. It's very out of the ordinary.
Yes, and won't that attract attention, I would think?
I don't know. I'm just.
I
don't
mean, when you have the same treasurer do repeated updated forecasts, do they not compare off their previous forecasts and just update it? I mean, aren't the assumptions similar on lines that aren't changing when they go to the next forecast?
They are similar, and you typically update them.
And we don't have the assumptions from previous forecasts?
We have the Word document from the previous one.
I mean, if
I'm
we're
going to have to add a bunch of stuff to the Word document, and then I'm going to have to completely change all the number lines because it's going to be a domino effect. And I'm adding in a bunch of stuff for personnel because it's not just 1 year, it's going to be all years that are affected, and I'm not going to have board approval. I'm just going to have like your verbal approval that this is okay before I've even
yeah,
done it. You know what I mean? I'm just like,
we can do that. We've done it before with contracts, and we're able to do that.
We're able to submit a 5-year forecast without being board approved.
No, we're able to vote on approving a 5-year forecast with the adjustments based off the 2019 previous December or November forecast with the added adjustments. We should be able to vote to approve that.
all right, you know what? We'll do this, but I'm going to bring it back when it's done and for actual board approval with the final document. I mean, I'm going to have to submit it
Yeah.
but I'm bringing it back, document to cover myself.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, no offense, but this is extremely out of the ordinary, and I'm a little out of my comfort zone with it. So I'm going to bring the final document back for board approval, if that's okay.
No offense, but the current forecast, I feel the same way.
Understandable.
Katie, at the last meeting, I mean, we did mention or ask you if you could reach out to the prior treasurers, at least the last two, which was Tammy and Mr. Jones. And you also have Leslie right there. You could have asked several questions too, because you said that you didn't understand their assumptions and that sort of thing. I guess I'm still a little concerned that you didn't want to reach out to them to go over some of the numbers, because this is the first forecast you've done for us, other than the one you updated in March as a preliminary one.
That statement is actually inaccurate. I have discussed things with them, and it's not that I don't understand what's going on. It's that I don't agree with their methodology, and I would use different methodology, and everybody has a different way of forecasting, and there's not one correct way of doing it. And so that is actually what happened. And I also use a forecasting consulting firm that is made up of multiple very experienced treasurers that does forecasting throughout the state of Ohio, that has also been very involved with the development of this forecast. So there is a lot of very, very heavy experience involved in putting together the document that you've been presented with here. So it's not just me doing it.
Is that through the ESC or?
No, it's Forecast 5. It's the company that I use, consulting company.
Okay, so that's additional service to the school then?
Correct.
That our treasurers have used in the past. They've used consulting firms for the 5-year forecast in the past.
You're
No,
right.
I wasn't aware of that. I just wanted to know for clarification.
Yes. And I used it up in Cuyahoga Falls, and a lot of treasurers throughout the state use this very, very well-known firm.
What's the name of the firm you said? Forecast 5.
Forecast 5.
And is that the one Tammy used that on
No,
her last forecast?
no. And they've actually offered to speak at any of your meetings if you so choose.
Well, that's a great idea. That's a great offer.
Is Josh, are you going to make a motion then to amend this?
Yeah, I made I said I made the motion to amend it to, to reflect the 2019 forecast projections and assumptions. Make the adjustment to the Nexus has been challenged. The additional operating for Marlboro Elementary, the actual costs, as well as the 10% possible cut to state funding.
I'll second that motion.
Does that also include the current cut to state funding?
Well, that
The actual, I don't
was
think he's talking about the actual.
Right, but that it may have been offset, but it was also an item that I had to include in there via expenditure reductions. So
I guess you have to.
Katie, I believe that would be in the actual figures. I don't think he's speaking to the 2020 actual figures that actually transpire for this year.
Well, these are
Is
the
that
sort
correct, Josh?
of things we're talking about. Like if we go back to 2019, there's probably a lot of things that are going to end up getting left out. That's what I'm worried about. Because while the revenue goes in, well, actually the revenue wouldn't go in. It would just be the reduction of expenditures. That wouldn't happen if we went with, you know what I'm saying? If we go back to
Josh.
2019, those expenditures wouldn't be reduced. And that's the only way that the CARES funding would have been accounted for. These are the kind of things I'm worried about.
Josh, can you speak to the fact that for tax year 2020, which is what we're in, whether you are asking her to report those figures at what is actually transpiring for the year?
Yeah, off of what our current numbers are, but the same projections that we had prior. That's what I'm saying. Future year.
You're talking the forecasted years 21 through 24, is that correct?
Yes. Well, we're still projected in the current year. We don't have the final numbers yet. But yeah, you need that I have to report that have been up, such as that cut from the state, as well as the CARES funding that offset it. Luke?
So I'm hearing that 2020 needs to be actual with what you know are going to be the additional, what's going to be additional for revenue and expenses for the remainder of fiscal year 2020.
Correct.
And so I'm going to submit this to the state. And if I bring the numbers back to you to have them board approved and you don't agree with what I submit, then we're going to have a problem.
That is a problem, Katie. I don't think you should do it.
And there's a lot going on here. There are so many variables since 2019, like what I just pointed out to you. Like this is a mess. Like I can't bend myself in this way that you're asking of me, and for it to not be like a mess. You see what I'm saying?
I see. I don't think you should have to. You made a forecast, either they want to accept it or not, and then you go from there. If you want to reject the forecast, make up your own and send it in, then the three of you can do that. That's wrong what you're asking her to do.
Like here's what I need you to do. Here's what I need you to do for it to be very clear, because this is the problem, is clarity. I need clarity to not put myself at risk, okay? Or the board at risk. I need you to take the document that I've presented you, and I need you to tell me what you want changed, because that's what we need. Because right now I'm guessing otherwise. Like there's just too much moving. We have to work from my document. We can't go back to the 19. That's not the one that's in front of us right now. And I need specific instructions off of my document. And I hate to be this way, but like I am so worried about the repercussions of, you know what I mean? It's freaking me out.
Which repercussions are you referring to?
Of me submitting what I think you're asking me to submit.
It would basically be the actual 2019 that you have on yours with the projections and assumptions from the previous forecast, as well as the other nexus adjustment, the cost cut to state funding. I just don't see, I mean, it's in an Excel sheet, correct?
Okay, so you want me to take my document,
Yeah,
and change the numbers on my document to read what?
with the pre-forecast had less the actual, changes that I just said.
But see, those changes compound in different ways. Like you're saying, add in the Marlboro expenditures, but then they're count based on what's it's creating a mess.
I think Katie's point is, if you guys are going to change some numbers, you need to change the numbers on her forecast that she has presented tonight. If you're not happy with what you see here, asking her to go back and use numbers that she didn't create on a forecast that's not hers is causing her a lot of stress and grief. And I totally respect that, and I am in no way, shape, or form supporting doing that. Nothing personal, but one of my jobs is to protect my employees and protect us as a board. And that's just, I've never gone down that road as a superintendent. And I concur with the treasurer. That makes me a little leery. But I hear what you're saying, Josh. But I guess my point is there a way that we can use the current treasurer's forecast right in front of us? Is there a way that those numbers can be adjusted?
Absolutely.
To make her feel more comfortable submitting this with her name attached to it? And Katie, I don't want to speak for you, but I think that's how I'm feeling.
Right. And you know what? We're going to go through this right now. I hate to drag this out, but it's got to be done this way because I'm not going to submit something and it not be the way you guys want it. So just a minute.
Would it be better to have Tammy come in and meet with us and have another meeting on Thursday or Friday so she can get it submitted?
Katie stepped out of her office for a
Or,
bit.
she left. She left the room.
I hear the printer running. She's probably printing something.
All right.
Katie, would it be better to try to schedule a meeting with Tammy, who prepared our last forecast, and have you sit down with her and maybe Josh come in and sit down and talk to the two of you and try and reach a meeting of the minds and resubmit that to the board on Thursday or Friday so you can get it submitted this week?
And she needs to have some problem tonight to get it submitted.
Yeah. Well, the ESC is already telling me that we need to get this submitted. And secondly, this is out of my hands and out of Tammy's hands at this point. This is the board's forecast and the board's recommendation, and therefore you guys need to direct me in exactly what you want. So
I think it'd be helpful to have Tammy in the room and help us understand her assumptions versus yours because of the large discrepancy.
Well, we can revise it later on with that, Carolyn, but what she's saying is we need to come to a conclusion tonight to be able to get this submitted.
Okay.
To not,
okay, so we can probably then
and here's the
schedule
other
that meeting later.
The real estate. So you're telling me you want the real estate back to being reported on the incorrect lines instead of being reported on as it should be, with public utility being on the correct line.
What public utilities do we have, Katie?
You had I think it was around $650,000 reported in real estate.
I know, but what public utility do we have as a district?
I don't have it listed out or the information in front of me, but I can tell you that in prior years, you guys have had roughly about $650,000 in public utility, and it was always being reported up on real estate. And in my forecast, I had it put down on the proper line. So are we going back to having it being reported improperly, or are we going to go with my forecast and have it on the correct lines?
You're using the same amount or not?
Well, other than decreasing correction. I'm sorry, I can't talk. Other than decreasing collection rates slightly in 2021, I believe Tammy and my numbers were fairly similar when you sum them all up, other than the Nexus stuff. Or they were close anyway. So do you just want to leave real estate alone so it's accurate? Do you want me to take out the decrease in collection rate? What do you want to do? Or do you want me to go back to the original numbers and have them reported on the wrong lines?
Katie, my recommendation is you do what this firm is asking you to do. You've been working with them. They've set you down the right path there. So I think you do what they've asked you to do. You keep things separated on the correct line. I think that's the first thing we want to make you feel comfortable with, because that's what you're being told to do by these people. I think that's important.
I know I have to follow the direction of the board, though. This is the board's forecast, so I'm
understand.
asking the board what they want me to do.
But you're asking the question, do we want to change the numbers for the real estate property tax? That's the question you're asking the board, correct?
Yes,
Okay, line 1.010.
yes.
I thought she's asking about the public utilities, right?
Well, that
We're talking
On
about 1.010 right now. We're talking general property tax. How
Yeah.
do you guys want to deal with that line? Do you like her numbers, or do you want them adjusted?
or do you want me to take? Because I know you didn't like decreasing some things.
I'd say they're fine separate, but there is quite a bit of decrease, in 2020 and 2021.
Okay, so do you want me to take the collection decrease out? I can do that.
Yeah, I would take the decrease out of that, but separate it. But yeah, basically line 1.020 is that tax mixed in with the Nexus money, which kind of just makes it confusing to know which is which. Before, Nexus was on that line by itself, and it made it pretty obvious.
Yes, and that was improper reporting. So do you
Yeah.
want to go back to improper reporting or correct, or do you want it to be correct?
I would
I'm sorry.
keep the numbers the same as they were forecast prior, but you can separate them. Put that along with Nexus, but if you didn't have it with the Nexus money, that line 1.010 would be what it was prior. So
Right. But what I'm saying is you have public utility money up in real estate before. It doesn't belong up there in the 2019 forecast.
agreeing with that. What I'm saying is go ahead and put it on the line like they explained you how they said the right way to do it was. But if you take away, let's say, for example, look at 2020, the previous forecast had line 1.010 at a little over 9 million. What does that come out to on this one? If you take the Nexus money out of that, that leaves us with 650,000. So that puts that at 8.9 instead of 9. So that was actually reduced about 100,000 for 2020, correct?
And that's based on the actual tax settlement that's coming in. So I wouldn't mess with that if I were
That
you.
is actual tax settlement.
Yes,
Yeah, don't touch that one.
I would not. And this is what I'm telling you. I would not. This is another item. Where I'm saying, you go back to 2019, you don't have as accurate of data because you're going back to 2019.
We've already had a cut in the funds from property tax.
I entered the final tax settlement in for fiscal year 2020, and those were the numbers. That's what it plays out to be.
Okay.
So if there was a decrease from the November 2019, well, that's because the numbers actually played out less.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
that's what it's going to be.
Well, the actual on 2019 is exactly the same.
Well,
As the-
yeah, because those are actual numbers.
Okay.
So
Well, I guess if we have to stay with this report as far as the time being to get something approved.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, if your big beef is with purchase services,
Yeah.
just have me change purchase services
Yeah.
to that line and those numbers. That would be the easiest way to handle it. And
Okay.
then I wouldn't have to do a bunch of crazy things that might put the district at risk or put me at risk because I can't really bring it back and have it approved before I have it submitted to the state, and you know what I mean?
Okay.
That's my worry. I don't want to send something to the state that's not what you want.
My only concern wasn't just with, I mean, it's, there's discrepancies all throughout this as far as the previous forecast and now. And
But like I'm showing you, the discrepancies are so far pretty logical, right? I mean, with the real estate, you're
Yeah,
seeing,
I don't know on some of the stuff. Yeah.
I mean, I just explained to you real estate on a different line. The settlement came in less than what was projected in November. I mean,
Yeah.
there's data to back this stuff up. It's not just
The items that are actual, and we know, I think Josh has said those need reported to be what you know them actually to be. It's the forecasted numbers that seem
well,
unrealistic based on prior forecasts.
2020 is a forecasted number where I brought it in based on the settlement coming in, and it's a pretty darn good number. But it doesn't match what was in November.
Okay.
There's a reason it doesn't match what is in November.
So are you saying go down to 3.030? Let's just look at purchase services, okay? Because that seems to be where the grief is, right? Okay.
And if we're going to make more changes going forward, let's make more changes going forward. But let's get this thing done.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Get it submitted and
Yeah, let's go down to 3.030. I mean, we got 4.6 in fiscal year 21, 4.4 fiscal year 20. So you guys are saying those are going up too high. Is that
So
really what we're saying? So you want the treasurer to back those down, 3.030.
and you want to put in the purchase service line item for 3.030 from the November 2020 forecast, which equates to 4.2 million, 3.9 million, 4.1 million, and so on.
Correct.
Okay. And then I would just say that I've never seen where purchase services decrease like
Never.
just my comment, just so you know, I'm informing you, but that's
Just general inflationary costs. There's going to be
that's your call.
like a 4% pay, probably something like that.
Where were you at during the 2019 forecast, Joe? You say they never go down. This was showing that it goes down on the 2019 November forecast. Did anybody mention that never goes down then when they approved this forecast?
That very well may have been because they did started paying 6B with those funds. So it may not have been, and I don't know because I wasn't here, but
It got supplanted, you mean?
an increase in salaries and a decrease in purchase services. It could have been a trade-off. It's hard to say. I don't really know because I wasn't here, but we don't know the whole story. But typically, purchase services, that's just not the way it happens. But
This is like salary.
right.
Ours are going to go up too.
I mean, a lot of that a lot of those are contracted items, and you don't typically have fewer contracts for things. Or, there's a lot of those, a huge portion of that line is not controllable because it's all through your foundation deduction, like open enrollment out or, open enrollment out, tuition, community schools, like all those items, they're not controllable. You can't stop it.
So Katie, do you understand what you're being asked to do there on line 3.030? Do you understand the request?
So I'm literally taking the forecast that I've presented and I'm taking the purchase service line from November 2020 or 2019 and I'm slapping it in there. That's what you're asking of me. Okay. That I feel so much better with that because that is so much easier to do than and I'm
And that's the same that you gave us in March, right? Those would be the identical figures that you had in March. Is that correct?
For purchase services?
Yes, on purchase services.
That would be Tammy's figures from the November 2019 forecast that would have played into the figures that were in the March update. So in a sense, yes, you could say that.
Okay, is there anything else that you guys are looking at here that needs to be modified for the treasurer?
And could you just maybe in your notes that you put with the forecast address the enrollment piece as far as how you chose a different way to count our students than what we have been using apparently on the prior 5-year forecast? Just so that when we go back to start comparing these, we can have that for reference.
Sure, I can put a note. Let me write that down while I'm here. I can write a note in here that, if I haven't already, but that ADM is based off of funded count from SFPR reports.
And I guess just put the numbers that you've used in that because you said it won't go on the front of the 5-year forecast. If you could put the actual enrollment count that you used in the forecast in your notes.
Well,
I believe
it would be attributed to these numbers that you see right here. And
right,
actually,
but if you could put the head count, if you'd put the head count in your notes, that would be
well,
a helpful reference.
the head, I'm not sure what you're asking for there. The funding count is actually what matters. The head count in a forecast, the head count doesn't mean anything. It means nothing in a forecast. The SFPR count, the actual funding count, is all that matters, because that's how we're funded. And actually, right now, because we're frozen, it means nothing, because we're not funded. I stand corrected. Casino revenue and wellness dollars are funded based on
Per kiddo, yeah.
per kid, but foundation
Is
fund.
that too difficult for you to put that in the notes, the number? I mean, we have had it on all our prior 5-year forecasts. And I know you said there wouldn't be a place for it on this one.
The other
An alternate would be to put it in the notes.
the other issue I see with it is it's a moving target. Isn't that correct, Joe?
What's that?
Whatever day you do it is the day you're going to use. I mean, it's not moving that day because the other treasurers have been able to capture that.
The count that she's referring to is a moving target. It's a continuous count that never really has a specific target.
It's not
And
like the old days of ADM week being in October. Is what
So-
you're referring to.
it almost seems like an unnecessary. I mean, if that's your wish, I can figure out a way.
Just ask you to take a snapshot, like pick a day, May 28th, take a snapshot of, whatever.
Would Lee have that information, or?
Now, what number are you looking for? Are you looking for butts and seat numbers? Or are you looking for your number? Because you have your number, right?
For the number that Katie used to prepare this particular forecast.
You would use your number there. You want the number of kiddos that we're getting money for, is what you're saying.
If you want funded count, that's what you see on the report already. That's on the bar chart that you see already.
That's already in the report, Carolyn. You want it in the notes of the actual forecast? Is that what you're saying?
Well, she said that wouldn't go with the forecast.
It does.
Already in there.
It's in there already. I'm not sure what you're.
All these notes are going to be part of the actual forecast.
Yeah, these are the assumptions that go.
Oh, you're sending the charts and everything then. Okay, I didn't realize you were sending the charts. I'm sorry.
Yes, that's perfectly. Yep. This report is the assumptions.
She thought it was just a
The
present.
25-page report will go.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Are there any other changes that you want the treasurer to make other than what's been discussed?
I don't have anything at this time.
Katie, do you feel comfortable with what you're being asked to do?
Yep. If that's the wish of the board for me to make those changes, I will do that.
I think the board should have
Okay, so the
part
motion
of
on
it saying that Katie is not responsible for clerical errors that occur because of the rush job of making these changes. Since we're not giving her enough time, we can make the amendments later, we can make the adjustments later, but to hold her absolutely responsible for everything that we're asking her to do on short term is not fair to her.
Katie,
I
is
believe there's 4 numbers, Scott, that she's going to be changing in the forecast.
So then we shouldn't be worried about it then, right? I mean, four numbers will be changed, but there's a trickle down effect of where those other numbers and I
5 numbers.
there's a potential professional blowback on her about what we're asking her to do. It could potentially follow her beyond Marlington anywhere else. So what I'm saying is we need to protect her because we're asking her to do something that's out of the ordinary.
this is a public meeting and she's doing it at the board's request. So it's noted that the reason she's doing the change is because it was a request by the board.
Well, then if that covers it, then I'm fine with that. But
I don't know why.
I don't want to see it come back on her to say something went horribly wrong here because of the changes that are being made at the last minute. So if we're all comfortable with that by saying these things at this public meeting, that covers her, then I'm okay with that. Joe, are you okay with that?
Well, that's a good point, Katie. I mean, it's coming back to you. I mean, do you feel comfortable based on what we're being instructed tonight to?
I have consulted with the
Right.
with the company that I've been working with on these types of issues because I sort of saw it coming down the pipeline, and they have said that should we have these issues, that it is the board's forecast, and we go along these channels that we have gone down tonight,
Okay.
and so my level, the first set of changes I was starting to get uncomfortable with, just because we weren't amending my forecast.
Yeah. Yeah. What are your numbers? Totally
I'm
agree.
not, and I'm not even. That was getting a little wild, but I think we're in a good place now.
So we need to make a motion to change my previous motion to reflect what we're currently doing, and that's changing we're scratching the previous motion.
Josh, why don't you restate your amended motion?
Just restate the motion to the purchase services line to reflect the projections from the November 2019 forecast.
I'll second that.
Is there any further discussion? Please call the roll on the amended motion.
Mrs. Gabrick,
Yes.
Mr. Hagan,
Yes.
Mrs. Humphrey,
No.
Dr. Mason,
No.
Mrs. Stevens.
Yes.
Motion approved 3-2.
The motion on the, oh, go ahead.
That was motion to change, so yeah, you're right, go ahead.
Okay. The motion on the floor is to approve the 5-year forecast as presented in marked Exhibit 00 with the amendments as amended as just presented. Is there a motion? Oh, that we'd already approved that motion. I'm sorry. Is there further discussion on the motion, the original motion? So the motion we'll be voting on now is the motion to approve the 5-year forecast as presented in marked Exhibit 00, and that is as amended. And to clarify, that is to amend the purchased services line from the November 2019 forecast for the forecasted years 2021 through 2024. Katie, please call the roll.
Mrs. Gabrick,
Yes.
Mr. Hagan,
Yes.
Mrs. Humphries,
No.
Dr. Mason,
No.
Mrs. Stevens.
Yes.
Motion approved 3-2.
And before we adjourn, just a question for the board. We will be needing to meet to discuss administrative and personnel, to have a discussion on that in the near future. Do you want to schedule a special meeting for that? Or do you want that included with the next regular board meeting, which is June 4th?
I'm good either way. I don't have a preference.
Yeah, you say June 4th, the next meeting?
I
That,
believe June 4th is the next regular meeting.
yeah, that's fine.
That's fine.
Karen,
That's fine.
Karen, I didn't hear what you said. The regular
That's
meeting
fine. June 4th, a regular meeting, yes.
is
Yeah,
fine?
that's fine with me too.
Okay, thank you. And if Katie, you could put that on the agenda then for the June 4th meeting. And is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second?
Is there any discussion? Katie, please call the roll.
Mrs. Gabrick,
Yes.
Mr. Hagan,
Yes.
Mrs. Humphries,
Yes.
Dr. Mason,
Yes.
Mrs. Stevens.
Yes.
Motion approved 5-0.
Thank you.
All right, good night.